Trump urges peace, rejects annexation at UNGA 80. Abbas demands justice. Palestinian statehood is a right, not a reward. UK Starmer declares Palestinian statehood a moral imperative, not a political bargain. And Nigeria Shatima calls for justice, endorses two-state solution at UNGA 80. Good afternoon, welcome to Around the World in 30 Minutes on Politics and Business Television. I'm Fatima Abubakar Oyibo. Many thanks for joining us. Details of this news stories and more content to come after the short break. Stay with us. We start with a pivotal moment at the United Nations General Assembly as President Donald Trump addressed world leaders with a firm stance on the Israel-Palestine war. In a speech marked by urgency and defiance, Trump called for an immediate end to the war in Gaza, emphasizing the need for negotiation and the return of hostages. He rejected recent moves by Western nations to recognize Palestinian statehood, calling them rewards for Hamas and warning that such actions could embolden further violence. While Trump stopped short of outlining a detailed peace plan, he made it clear that the United States does not support the annexation of Palestinian land by Israel. His remarks come amid heightened tensions and stalled ceasefire talks, with critics noting his continued support for Israeli military operations. The president's speech drew sharp contrast with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who reaffirmed Palestinian statehood as a right, not a privilege, as a global body grapples with fractured alliance. Trump's message signals a complex path forward in the region. Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas delivered a powerful address calling for the international community to recognize the state of Palestine not as a concession but as a long-denied right. Speaking via video conference, Abbas declared that there will be no peace without justice and no justice without Palestine's liberation. He emphasized the urgent need for an independent, sovereign Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living peacefully alongside Israel.
On behalf of the State of Palestine, I would like to express my deepest appreciation for the co-presidency, the United Nations, and all participating states for the historic New York Declaration that was issued during July's conference and adopted by the General Assembly by an overwhelming majority. It marked the beginning of an irreversible path towards ending the humanitarian catastrophe and ending occupation pursuant to international legitimacy and the Arab Peace Initiative. It was the embodiment of an independent state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side with Israel in peace, security, and good neighborliness. The declaration stressed that the war against our people must come to an immediate and durable end. It noted that the crimes emanating from the siege, the starvation, and destruction cannot be a means of achieving security. Therefore, we call for a permanent ceasefire. We need to ensure humanitarian access through the United Nations and UNRWA. We need to guarantee the release of hostages, all hostages and prisoners, with the withdrawal of the occupation forces from Gaza. We need a start without delay of Gaza and the West Bank reconstruction through the Cairo International Conference. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we would like...
Abbas painted a harrowing picture of life under Israeli occupation, describing what he called the genocidal war in Gaza, and that has killed over 220,000 Palestinians, mostly civilians. He condemned settlement expansion and annexation plans and attacks on holy sites, framing them as violations of international law and existential threats to the two-state solution. With a tone both defiant and pleading, Abbas urged world leaders to act decisively, stating that Palestinian statehood is not a diplomatic favor, it is a moral and legal imperative. In a historic shift, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer addressed the 80th United Nations General Assembly with a bold declaration. The United Kingdom now formally recognizes the state of Palestine. Starmer framed the move not as a reward for any faction, but as a necessary step to preserve the possibility of peace. He stated that ordinary people, Israeli and Palestine, deserve to live in peace, emphasizing that a two-state solution is the only viable path forward. He condemned Hamas as a brutal terror organization and made clear they would have no role in Palestinians' future governance.
As we reaffirm our historic commitment to the United Nations, we must face the challenges of the present. A present in which we in the United Kingdom do not stand up for one nation's rights whilst ignoring others, but act resolutely with the Charter as our compass. This is why I want to address directly the Israeli-Palestinian tragedy. What is happening in Gaza is indefensible. It is inhumane. It is utterly unjustifiable. And it must end now. The people of Palestine, whose state we proudly recognize this week, and the people of Israel deserve better than the horrific acts by Hamas on October the 7th that left children without their parents and parents without their children. Better than the torment of families waiting desperately for the return of their loved ones from the most barbaric captivity. Better than the fanatical rule by Hamas, a vile, pitiless terrorist organization that must have no future in Gaza. Better than Israel's denial of life-saving humanitarian aid and the catastrophic famine that it has caused. As Israel escalates its military operations and displaces Palestinian families again and again and again, there can be no answer to these horrors but concerted diplomatic action to keep the hope of peace alive.
Starmer's speech came amid mounting global pressure and a worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He criticized Israel's ongoing bombardment and border restrictions, calling them utterly intolerable and demanding unrestricted aid access. The Prime Minister also announced sanctions against senior Hamas figures and pledged continued humanitarian support, including evacuating injured children to the UK for treatment. With this recognition, the UK joins a growing coalition, including Canada, Australia, and Portugal, seeking to reignite the fading hope of a two-state solution. Still on the news, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has reaffirmed his government's recognition of the state of Palestine, calling it the only path to peace in a region torn by decades of conflict. In a passionate address, Sanchez emphasized that the move is not a reward for any group, but a principled stand for justice, dignity, and international law. He verbalized that the Palestinian people are being annihilated and advised world leaders to act decisively to end the suffering in Gaza and revive the two-state solution.
Also see this in its full severity in the Middle East, in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip. We cannot remain silent or look away from the devastation, the bombings, including of hospitals, schools, and places of refuge. In light of the countless civilian deaths, famine, starvation, the forced displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. To what end? These are abhorrent acts that stand in stark contrast to everything that this forum represents. Toledo, Seville, Barcelona, and so many other places. Come home. This was the spirit behind the 2015 law, which was passed with broad consensus, granting Spanish nationality to descendants of Sephardic Jews originally from Spain. It is for this reason, and it is so difficult for us to understand, that we are so pained by the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza. We therefore cry out, we implore, we demand, stop this massacre now. No more deaths in the name of a people that are so wise and ancient, who have suffered so greatly throughout history. Let us be clear.
In the meantime, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese made headlines with a landmark announcement. Australia now formally recognizes the state of Palestine. In a joint statement with Foreign Minister Penny Wong, Albanese emphasized that this recognition is not a reward for any group, but a reaffirmation of the Palestinian people's legitimate and long-held aspirations for statehood. He urged world leaders to support a two-state solution as the only viable path to lasting security for both Israelis and Palestinians. Albanese condemned the atrocities of October 7 and made clear that Hamas must have no role in Palestine's future. He raised the Palestinian Authority's renewed commitment to democratic reform, financial transparency, and peaceful coexistence, calling them direct undertakings to Australia. The Prime Minister also pledged support for a credible peace plan that includes rebuilding Gaza and ensuring Israel's security. With this move, Australia joins a growing coalition, including the UK and Canada, seeking to reignite momentum for peace in the Middle East. At the 80th United Nations General Assembly, Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima took the global stage with a message rooted in moral clarity and humanitarian concern. Representing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Shettima condemned the violence in Gaza, calling it a humanitarian catastrophe and a violation of international law. He emphasized that Nigeria stands not as a partisan actor but as a peacemaker, advocating for a dignified resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through a two-state solution.
The pace of change across borders is a pause without pause. It manifests in the tools of technology, in the movements of information and finance, in the corrosive ideologies that preach violence and division, in the gathering storm of the climate emergency, and in the tide of irregular migration. We must own this process of change. When we speak of nuclear disarmament, the proliferation of small weapons, Security Council reform, peer access to trade and finance, and the conflicts and human suffering across the world, we must recognize the truth. These are stains on our collective humanity. For all our careful diplomatic language, the slow pace of progress on these hardy perennials of the UN General Assembly debate has led some to look away from the multilateral model. Some years ago, I noticed a shift. We must show that existing structures are not set in stone. We must make real change, change that works, and change that is seen to work. If we fail, the direction of travel is already predictable. We are here to strengthen the prospects for peace, development, and human rights. Madam President, I want to make 4 points today to outline how we can do this. 1, Nigeria must have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. This should take place.
Shettima's remarks marked a shift in Nigeria's diplomatic tone from development-focused appeals to moral diplomacy. He declared that the sanctity of human life should not be trapped in endless debate, urging world leaders to choose peace over vengeance. While the speech drew praise for its principled stand, critics at home questioned the vice president's silence on Nigeria's democratic crisis, including insecurity and rising hunger. Nonetheless, Shatima's address signaled Nigeria's intent to reclaim a bold voice in global affairs, positioning itself as a conscience-driven advocate for justice. President Mokgweetsi Masisi of Botswana has voiced strong support for the recognition of a Palestinian state, calling it essential for achieving long-lasting peace in the Middle East. He emphasized that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza demands urgent global attention and action.
I also appreciate the decision by Britain, Australia, Canada, and France, among others, to give heightened attention and consideration to the Palestinian crisis. The carnage in Gaza, it must prick our collective consciences. We stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people in their pursuit of a home and of dignity. So too, we affirm our support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. We urge all parties to stop the war and seek a peaceful resolution. Distinguished delegates, the theme of this General Assembly is better together. This is not a slogan, it is a truth. We are better together in combating pandemics, better together in adapting to climate change, better together in securing peace, and better together in ensuring that human dignity is not a preserve of the few, but the inheritance of all. Let us therefore recommit ourselves to multilateralism, not as a matter of convenience, but as a matter of deep necessity. For none of us can weather the storms of this century alone. As Botswana looks to the future, we do so with humility, but also with determination. We stand ready to contribute, to partner, and to lead where we can. Together, let us ensure that when future generations mark 100 years of the United Nations, they will say of us, they were a generation that turned words into action, promises into progress, and hope into reality. I thank you. Thank you so very much.
He reaffirmed Botswana's commitment to the two-state solution, urging both parties to return to dialogue. He condemned attacks on civilians and UN personnel and called for respect for international law and human dignity. President John Dramani Mahama has reaffirmed Ghana's unwavering support for the recognition of Palestinian state. He emphasized that Ghana recognized Palestine in 1988 and continues to back a two-state solution grounded in international law and human dignity.
Ghana recognized the state of Palestine in 1988 and supported a two-state solution to the conflict since then. And I say, contrary to the claims of some, a two-state solution would not be a reward for Hamas. It would rather be a reprieve for the hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children and people who are facing collective punishment and forced starvation for no reason other than the fact that they are Palestinian. For nearly 2 years and for the fear of reprisals, we here in this General Assembly have been playing hide and seek with language to find the right words to help us avoid or excuse what we all know is taking place in Gaza.
Mahama condemned the suffering in Gaza, describing it as a collective punishment of innocent civilians. He rejected claims that statehood rewards extremism, stating it is a retreat for those facing starvation and displacement simply for being Palestinian. And that wraps up the program, but before we go, the headlines again. Trump urges peace, rejects annexation at UNGA 80. Abbas demands justice, says Palestinian statehood is a right, not a reward. UK Starmer declares Palestinian statehood a moral imperative, not a political bargain. And Nigeria's Shetima calls for justice, endorses two-state solution at UNGA 80. For more updates and in-depth analysis, follow Politics and Business.TV English on YouTube and Facebook. Connect with us on Instagram at P&BTV_English and TikTok at P&BTV_English. Remember to subscribe and stay informed. From me, Fatima Abubakar Oyibo, to have a lovely day and bye for now.